Well, as most of you know, this is a big week for us here at ESPN. This is the 14th annual V Week for cancer research. And of course, all week long, we here have been celebrating the life of the great Stuart Scott, who meant so much to so many of us here at ESPN, those who worked at ESPN when he was at ESPN, and those like myself who dreamed of working at ESPN because of people like Stuart Scott. And as you may know, the event on Saturday night, the UFC event, is being dubbed the UFC Fight Like Hell Fight Night in honor of his great speech several years ago at the ESPYS prior to his passing. And what an honor it is to be talking to his daughter, Sydni Scott, here this evening. Sydni, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I'm really happy to be here.
It's great to talk to you, and I know you don't do a lot of these, so it's a real privilege and honor for us as well. Your father, as you know, I don't need to tell you this, meant so much to so many different people, and every year around this time now, and it's amazing. It's been almost 6 years since his passing. We celebrate his life. What is this week like for you? As stories of your dad come out and people talk about him and honor him. What is it like for his daughter to see all this come out?
Honestly, that's exactly what it is. It is genuinely this chance to get to know him more and more each passing year based on hearing things that people say about him, stories that they have about him. I can't tell you how many people I have talked to that have said something like, I was a kid, I grew up watching your dad on SportsCenter, I absolutely loved him, it's what I wanted to do. I literally ran into him in an airport, in a coffee shop, and I went up to him and we ended up having a conversation for 20-30 minutes. He asked me about who I was, where I was from, what I was interested in doing, what I was passionate about, what sports I loved. And it's just really, really incredible to have known him as my dad, and also to be able to year after year just keep learning about who he was as a person and what he meant to other people. So V Week is for my sister and I, it's a really exciting week, but it's also a really, really special week.
Well, not to make this about myself, but I felt like you were telling my own story there for a second, because I grew up, looking up to your father and Rich Eisen, his partner for so many years. And in 1999, I was at Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals at Madison Square Garden, wearing all my Knicks gear, and I saw your dad hosting SportsCenter on the court, and I was so excited. I didn't want to meet any player. I wanted to meet your dad. And he was there, and I waited for him to finish up all his tapings, and I shouted his name, and he gave me a fist bump. And a good friend of mine actually took a picture of the moment that he gave me a fist bump, and I have it till this day, and it means so much to me. So that's my Stuart Scott moment, and he couldn't have been nicer from my recollection. So, you kind of encapsulated my memories of him as well. Could I ask you, as someone who knew him a lot closer than the rest of us, what was he like as a father?
It's always really funny when people ask me that, because there's an understanding of stage presence and TV personas. But I can honestly say that he was very genuinely a very similar person to the person that people saw on TV. Definitely a lot goofier, but very, very intense. I have, just a million stories about him dancing around the house. He loved musicals. We used to sing and at the top of our lungs around the house all the time. Very intense about sports. I think that's probably one of the most genuine parts about it, is that I remember when I was younger, I grew up without really a great conceptualization of what it meant to have a job. Like, I didn't really know what that was, because I saw him go and I would go with him to work, and I saw him doing something that he just so genuinely loved, that I was like, oh, this is fantastic. You just grow up and you have fun and people pay you to do it. And that's just what adulthood is like. I can't wait. His love for sports was so genuine and so deep. And other than that, I think he was just a very passionate, engaging person. I think that he was the kind of person that could engender passion out of anyone. I mean, like, he would give speeches before my soccer team's state championships when I was a kid. He had a way of bringing things out of people that was just so special. Another one is, we would have tournaments and we'd go to the beach, and he would organize my whole soccer team to play a game of football on the beach. He'd draw out the lines on the sand, and he would have plays in between he would have all of the plays. He took it very seriously. We were not allowed to. It was great. He brought a lot of passion and joy to life, and it's who you saw on the television, and it was tenfold knowing him personally.
Do you recall when you realized that he wasn't just your dad, but he was this really famous guy on TV that so many people looked up to?
Yeah. I think that's probably been something that I have, as I said before, have been recognizing more and more the older I got. I think when I was little, it was a lot of fun to go to work with him, but there were definitely some times when, like he was always away for Father's Day, and that was really difficult. And so I think that there was a part of me when I was a lot younger that sort of rejected the sports side of things and the fame side of things. And so I just in the 6 years since he's died, it's been this really, surprisingly, you would think that I know, but it's been this really eye-opening experience to see how many people he impacted, what he meant to people, especially what he meant to people of color. And that's been something that I am so grateful to continue learning about literally every single day.
There's so much on TV. There's so much content these days. There's so many people on TV that, sometimes it's all just a blur and you're kind of here and then you're gone and then people forget about you. But his impact, and especially the way he was on television, as you said, like dropping lines from rap songs in his highlight reads and things like that. Like, this is stuff that is still talked about today. Like, he was truly a pioneer.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if you had a sense of that, when he was alive, when he was doing his job, that what he was doing wasn't just a guy on TV. He was a trailblazer. He was a pioneer for people. And this is something that I don't think anyone will ever forget. Did you have a sense for that, or did it take some time to understand that?
It definitely took some time because, again, it was so similar to who he was as a person at home that, those one-liners that he would drop are the same ones that he would test out at my soccer games, or even worse, test out at our dance recitals or something like that. And so I think that what has been really, really special to grow, to learn, and grow to have a better understanding of is the fact that for me, by the time I had an awareness of what it was he was doing and his style, he was sort of on his way up. He was smooth sailing. But I think for me, it's been really impactful to learn about how difficult it was to sort of get that approval and to be able to actually show an authentic side of himself, as opposed to a more, sort of traditional persona that was sort of asked of him and was demanded of him. And so it's twofold. It's one, that was who he was as a person, and it was two, that he had this just utmost refusal to betray or reject who he was as a person, where he grew up, his community. And that is something that is so powerful to me, that it wasn't easy. And there were times when it was definitely something that was risking his career, and he still just had this steadfast dedication to representing not only himself, but people who look like him, people who came from where he came from. And that is something that I definitely didn't know when I was younger, and that I have just grown to have an understanding of, that is just so powerful to me.
Could I ask, and maybe you don't know the answer, but I'm just curious, to the best of your recollection, like, what made him happiest?
That's an interesting question. Um, I think, I think connecting with people that were important to him was when he was happiest. I think that, and it sort of, he loved sports, obviously, but I think that it didn't matter what the medium or what the platform was. I think that the ability to connect with people through sports, through music, through art, um, all of that is when I saw him at his happiest, especially with family. That's what it was. It was really anyone in the world who he could connect with, and who he could touch, and who he could leave an impact on, and not even necessarily even leave an impact, but just sort of, I saw him light up when he was able to really really form connections with people. I don't know if I have a better way to explain it than that, honestly.
No, I think that's a great answer. And it's actually something that always stuck with me watching him as a viewer, because something that always was impressive to me as someone who kind of wanted to do what he did one day was to see the respect that the athletes had for your father, the way they spoke to him. They spoke to him differently than they spoke to other people. When the NBA champions would get their award, it was different when your dad was holding the mic as opposed to someone else. And I'm wondering, like, what's your favorite sort of athlete Stuart Scott moment? Is there a moment that you were privy to behind the scenes where you saw someone who was larger than life speak to your dad like a friend, like a colleague, where, most people wouldn't get that kind of interaction?
I can do even better than that. Ready?
Okay.
So when I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I remember I was at ESPN with my dad, and he was shooting a commercial. It had something to do with someone stuck in a tree. Don't remember all the details, but I remember it was him and it was Shaq. And in between takes, again, it was ease and it was mutual respect. And I don't know where this request came from, but I wanted to try on Shaq's shoes. And so my dad was kind of like, yeah, that would be super funny, again, no, like, oh my God, like my daughter really wants
Right,
to,
right.
okay. Like he was like, this would be hilarious. Let's definitely do this. And so there's a picture of me somewhere didn't take my shoes off, wearing my shoes inside Shaq's shoes. And they're probably about as long as I was tall. And it was a lot of fun. And again, it was that he had personal relationships with people. And I think that it was very fundamentally based on mutual respect.
What do you think he would say about this past year, especially in sports and especially in the NBA, where we saw the players really step up and use their voice in so many different ways with everything that has happened over the past year and lending a spotlight to, the racial divide in this country? I feel like this would be something he would be very passionate about and he would be very proud of the players. What do you think he would make of all of this?
I have to say that is one of the things that I think about a lot, is how much I would have wanted to see how he interacted with, with people and with everything that has happened this year. And I'm really disappointed because I think that he would have, I'm really upset because I think he would have had a lot to say. I think that it was something that my sister and I were sort of girding him more and more to be more vocal about. But at the end of the day, the dynamic of racial tension in this country is something that he felt very strongly about, and is something that it obviously wasn't necessarily at the forefront of his persona because he talked about sports, but it was something that if you knew him, he was very passionate about. And I think that especially, I remember, it's a little funny actually, when he first got a Twitter and he started tweeting and he was very excited about us, and he'd come into our rooms and show my sister and I a tweet that he was proud of. I think that, again, that ability to connect with people, I think that he would have had a lot of valuable insight about not only, I was going to say resilience, but not only resilience, but I think also the responsibility and the accountability that's necessary for people who have platforms to, and not just to speak about it, but to genuinely to do something meaningful with the things that they have been given. I think that in terms of service and in terms of what he was passionate about, it really was about whoever you are, whatever privileges and opportunities that you have, it is your responsibility to do what you can with what you have. And so I think that he would have felt very strongly about the response of the NBA. I think he would have felt very strongly about, everyone, every athlete, everyone in sports who has had a platform that has been vocal about the fairly unacceptable state of how race is considered and treated in this country. And I obviously can't speak for him, but it's something that I think about a lot, and that I think that he could have had a lot of valuable things to say.
Another thing that always stuck with me and impressed me, blew me away, honestly, was, after he was diagnosed with cancer, you would hear of him taking some time off for treatment and then coming back to work, sometimes on the same day. Obviously, you would see that he was, a little skinnier, and I can't imagine, I know people who have been affected by cancer. I can't imagine being on television and the amount of energy that takes. What do you remember from those days, and what he had to muster up in terms of getting on television and performing the way in which he did?
I think those times were a sort of counterintuitively a mix of extreme insecurity and extreme courage, because the darker side, or the less inspiring side of it, is that it was really, really scary. And his job was a public facing job, and it was really difficult for him to lose all that weight and to be gaunt and to not feel like himself, and to not feel strong. I know that one of the things that he said to me when in a very vulnerable place was that he hated what cancer did to him because it made him feel like he couldn't protect my sister and I. And so there was a lot of insecurity. There was a lot of fear that I think it's really it's true and it's helpful and it's powerful to talk about people's courage and to talk about people's resilience. But I think it is just as necessary and realistic to talk about fear and vulnerability. And so I think it was, there was all of that. But at the end of the day, he did still get up and, whether it be at the ESPYs, go onto that stage or walk into the studio and do the job that people really appreciated him for doing. And so it was a very particularly, that's not eloquent. It was a really difficult time, but it was something that was really unique to watch him both struggle with and struggle through.
A lot of sports communities have a lot of respect for your father. The MMA community as well, believe it or not, because he was one of the first people at ESPN to say, yo, this MMA sport deserves some attention. And for Stuart Scott to give this sport that no one was talking about a few years ago, love and attention, and in fact, train in MMA while he was sick was a real impressive thing. And it was almost like, wow, like a big star like Stuart Scott actually cares about our little sport. This was really cool stuff. And again, groundbreaking stuff. When you saw that he was starting to train in MMA, despite the fact that he was battling cancer, what did you think? And what do you remember of that?
I remember that as being exactly who he was. He absolutely loved sports. All my life growing up, he was playing pickup football. He was playing, tag football. He was playing soccer with me. And obviously the sort of the nature of running was difficult for him. And so it was genuinely the most incredible thing for me as a kid to be able to watch him get back into and have access to like the physicality of sports again, because that it just ended up being the perfect outlet for him. And I think that I didn't grow up watching MMA and he didn't grow up watching MMA. And so on the one hand, it was really, really incredible to watch that community just welcome him. And on the other hand, it was just so awe-inspiring to watch him feel joy like that. It was like really like if I can tell a quick story,
Please.
His favorite thing to do was to, especially at family holidays, is to put any and everyone in a rear naked chokehold, and nobody was exempt. His 12-year-old daughter isn't exempt. His 70-year-old mother isn't exempt. And you do in fact have to tap out. Like he was like, I'm sorry, make a rational decision here. And so it just brought so much joy to him to be able to engage in that part of him, in that side of him again, that just loved sports and didn't just love watching sports and commentating on sports, but just really participating in and engaging sports. So it was really amazing.
And so more to that point, how do you feel about the fact that the UFC now for the, what is it, third straight year has an event in honor of your father, and the name of the event is, in reference to his famous SB speech, which you attended, which I do want to ask you about as well. To hear that this whole night is dedicated to him, and I don't know if you watched it last year, but so many great clips and so much, about cancer research. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I did. I watched it last year, and my sister actually, she went in person, and she shared a lot with me after she got back about how grounding it was to be there. And one of the things that she said was that it was one of the most incredible things that she talked about was the number of people who were able to be very brave and vocal about communicating and vocalizing their pain and their loss. And that it was this environment in which, again, sort of counterintuitively, there's so much energy, there's so much passion, there's so much joy. And there is also, camaraderie that's based on the understanding that, this event is being held in honor of someone that we have lost, in support of people who are going through it right now. And to me, there's nothing more powerful than that.
I was so impressed by you and your sister Taylor at that speech, because we look up to our parents. They're superhuman to us, right? And you got, how old were you at that time? You weren't that old.
I was 14.
14, right? And how old was she?
My sister was 19.
19. And there you are watching your dad with so much courage and strength speak about, something that was so hard to talk about. What do you remember from that night, and how difficult? I loved how you embraced him afterwards on the stage. Just when you think about that night and those words and that speech and everything that he represented on that stage, which we'll talk about and watch for many years to come, what do you remember from that most?
Um, I think I remember, and so what I think about now is the difference between what it felt like in that moment and what it feels like to watch that speech now, because I was away at summer camp before I went with him to the ESPYS, and so I wasn't there as I wasn't there for the hospital stint that he had right before we went to the ESPYS, and I also think that in a way, that's good and bad. He was so intent on making sure that his burden didn't become our burden that I'd sort of watched him go through cycles where he got really, really sick. He would lose a lot of weight. He would be really skinny. He'd be in the hospital for a long time. And then there was always the come around, and he always went into remission. And so I think that in that moment, it didn't even at that time, it didn't even fully strike me as how powerful that was at the time. I was incredibly proud of him. I was 14, so it was fun to be in California. But I remember in that moment walking up on the stage. It sounds like a cliche. It is a cliche. But it genuinely felt like there was no one else in the room. Um, it felt like exactly what our relationship was, in that he has this incredible opportunity to touch so many people and connect with so many people, and at the end of the day he was my dad. And so I think that compared to how I look at it now, that moment was surprisingly simple. It was just, he called me up and he needed me, and I was going to be there, and we were gonna go and go off and do whatever the rest of the night entailed. But it really was a moment of simplicity, I think, in comparison to now knowing how sick he was at the time.
I know that you and your sister have a Twitter feed. You're very active regarding the Cancer Memorial Fund. Could you tell us what do you do? Like, what is your part in the foundation, and what, like, if someone wanted to help out, if someone wanted to donate, where does that money go?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm very excited to talk about it, because I do feel I'm very excited about the trajectory of his memorial fund. So basically, my sister and I are both ambassadors to the V Foundation, and specifically to the Stuart Scott Memorial Cancer Research Fund. And one of the reasons that it is so important to me is because his fund specifically raises money for sort of two facets that are different from the main V Foundation. The first is that it raises money for minority researchers, and typically a lot of medical fields have been, predominantly white industries, or maybe not industries, but fields in the past, and so it provides funding for minority researchers to study cancer. And then the second part that I think is, equally as impactful, is that it raises and donates money for researchers that are looking specifically into discrepancies of cancer incidence among communities of color. And I think my sister was telling me a couple years ago that she learned that, I forget exactly what the percentage is, but a really low percentage of cancer research funding actually goes to pediatric cancer. Like, we sort of think of cancer research donations funding as sort of going in this big bucket maybe, but there are a lot of discrepancies that exist for different ages, for different demographics, and especially for different racial groups. And it's just, it's the leading cause of cancer among Hispanic men. Black women experience like specific kind of extremely aggressive breast cancer at a much higher incidence than any other racial category of women. Indigenous people have a higher incidence of cancer, of kidney cancer. There's so much, both medically and culturally, about our general culture, that creates really, really striking healthcare disparities. And I've heard some people refer to cancer, because it affects people indiscriminately, as the great equalizer. And I think that that's it's a flawed way of looking at it, because there are still a lot of differences in the healthcare that people are able to receive. And so that's why I'm really, really passionate about supporting this fund. And that's why it's also something that I know exactly what my dad would have been most passionate about, is exactly the communities that it's supporting, or the communities that he wanted to support. And so my sister and I, we do things like this. We basically take any opportunity possible to talk about the V Foundation, to talk about these healthcare disparities and discrepancies, to encourage people to donate, on, and all kinds of platforms. And I also want to add that in addition to raising awareness and raising money, especially during V Week, especially during SB Week, I think that genuinely one of the most incredible experiences I've had since being an ambassador to the V Foundation is being able to connect with people who share that loss. And, there's my sister and I kind of have this running joke that it is, it's the worst club to be a part of, but it's a big one. And there are a lot of people that have felt really alone in dealing with that kind of loss. And so I would say, for all of the things that my sister and I do, for all of, any content that we create, for all of the interviews that we do, for all of the fundraising events that we do, the ability to, and not the ability, but the chance and the opportunity to connect with people has just blown me away.
I must say, you're a very impressive young woman. What is your dream? Like, what do you want to do when you grow up?
So it's a funny story, because growing up, I always wanted to be a vet. I now realize that I'm not great at math or science, so that one is kind of out of the way. But I remember my sister is a filmmaker, and she's a photographer as well. And so whenever we would go, to the studio, on set, wherever it may be, she could always talk to people about like what kind of camera they're using. And, they would go back and forth and have all these great connections. And then they'd turn to me and say, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be a vet. And they're like, that is great for you. I'm going to go. And so since then, I'm currently a junior in college, and I am really passionate about, as we've been talking about, I'm really passionate about politics, and specifically race and politics. And I am a pre-law student. So I am hoping to be a lawyer someday, civil rights lawyer, federal judiciary, if I'm dreaming really big, whatever it may be, it's something to do with addressing the role that race plays in our politics and in our culture.
I love that. And I wish you the best with that. If I could ask two last quick questions. Mm-hmm. What was your favorite Stuart Scott catchphrase?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think, oh my goodness, you're going to make me pick. I think I like "cool as the other side of the pillow."
That was my favorite too. What a line. What a line. I always thought of him when I flipped the pillow or touched it. I mean, you always think of him, right?
Yep.
What a line. I wonder how he came up with that. Do you know how he came up with that?
I don't. I genuinely don't. I don't know if it just sprung to mind. I don't know if,
Beautiful.
If you woke up in the middle of the night and was like, this is great. I don't know. But I'm glad he did.
Yeah, what a line. I'm happy you said that. What do you think your dad's legacy ultimately is?
Also a good question. I think that it has, I think it has the potential to be a lot of things. It's obviously very, intertwined with sports. But I do hope, and I do think that it transcends the sort of the act of sport a little bit, and is more accurately sort of the community of sport, and the feeling of sport, and the emotion of sport, and the environment of sport. I grew up playing sports. I absolutely love sports. There's never a time that I feel more alive than when I'm playing sports. And I think that feeling, and that feeling sort of compounded by being in the room and being around other people who feel just as strongly as you, I think it's going to be that kind of community, and that kind of, again, I've said it before, but that the engagement with all kinds of communities, and especially communities that haven't previously, whether it be had access to certain sports or certain spaces, whatever it may be. I think that he is going to leave a long legacy of seeing people and really connecting with people.
That's a great legacy. Sydney, thank you so much for the time. Really, this was a huge honor and privilege for me. I wish the best to you, your sister, your entire family. And I want to let everyone know that they can go to v.org/donate to help. And also you can go to stuart.threadless.com to get a really cool Booyah t-shirt. $25 of each shirt sold goes to the Stuart Scott Cancer Memorial Research Fund. It's a great cause. I have my own shirt. I wore it proudly on my show on Monday, and I urge everyone out there who is a fan of his and who wants to support the great cause to get one as well. All the best to you again. Thank you so much for the time, and hopefully we could do this again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.